"If I cannot have him," Zira declared, pounding her fist against her chest, "then no one else will." She spun around to face the girls standing behind her, their faces pale with fright. "Not a single word of this must reach the village," she commanded, her voice sharp and cold. "If anyone speaks, you will all be finished." The girls huddled together, their eyes wide with terror, nodding quickly to show their understanding of the grave consequences of Zira's order. They knew the fury she was capable of unleashing. Long, long ago, in a village called Kwamiko, a place so beautiful that flowers bloomed everywhere in vibrant colors and birds sang sweet, melodious songs every morning as the sun rose, there lived a king named Adebale. King Adebale was not just a king. He was one of the wealthiest men ever known in those lands. But even with all his immense wealth, he was most famously known for his large, warm heart. He was married to Queen Ayabo, who was not only remarkably beautiful but also possessed a gentle smile that could brighten even the darkest of days. Together, they ruled Kwamiko with such profound love and care that their subjects felt as though they lived in the safest and happiest place on earth. Their reign was a time of peace and prosperity, cherished by all who lived under their benevolent rule. King Adebale and Queen Ayabo were blessed with a son named Kwame. Kwame grew into a handsome young man, the spitting image of his father. Some in the village even whispered that he was a perfect copy. But it wasn't just his appearance that people adored. Kwame possessed a heart as vast as his father's, brimming with kindness and affection for everyone he met. Every day, he would stroll through the village, greeting everyone with whom he crossed paths with a wide, bright smile and a warm, genuine welcome. He always found time to pause and speak with the elderly, to laugh and play games with the little children, and to readily offer help to those in need. The villagers felt incredibly fortunate to have someone like Kwame among them, the most joyful and approachable prince they had ever encountered. King Adebale was immensely proud of his son. Each time he witnessed Kwame assisting someone, or overheard the villagers praising his character, his heart swelled with immense joy. He often reflected to himself, "We have raised our son well." He was absolutely certain that one day, when Kwame ascended to the throne, the village of Kwamiko would become even more remarkable, and its people would continue to live in perpetual happiness. King Adebale felt truly blessed to have such a son, and firmly believed that the future of his kingdom was bright and full of radiant hope. By the ancient traditions of these lands, the young Prince Kwame was betrothed to a girl from the village, a girl named Zira. Zira was the daughter of Chief Jabulani, one of the most influential men in the village. In fact, Jabulani held a prestigious position as a member of the royal council. From the very moment Zira was born, the king and queen gazed upon her tiny face, and a warm smile blossomed on their own. They felt something uniquely special stir within their hearts and knew right then that she was the chosen one for their beloved son. Zira was an incredibly beautiful infant, and as she matured, her beauty unfurled and blossomed like a flower bursting forth in the vibrant colors of spring. Her long, dark hair shimmered like a raven's feather under the sun, and her eyes sparkled with the intensity of stars against the midnight sky. People would stop and gaze in awe as she passed by, unable to suppress their admiration for her radiant complexion and graceful, almost ethereal movements. She resembled the bright, captivating sun of the morning, and everyone was convinced that she would grow into the perfect princess, destined for royalty. The king and queen were pleased with their foresight, confident that their son would be eternally grateful for the exquisite bride they had selected for him when he finally came of age. However, as the years passed, it became painfully clear that Zira was more than just beautiful in appearance. Her parents, Chief Jabulani and his wife, had neglected a crucial aspect of their parental duties. They had failed to instill in her the virtues of humility and kindness. Instead, Zira grew up believing she was inherently better than everyone else around her. She became so self-centered and arrogant that she began to act as though she were already the queen, even though she was still merely a young girl within the village community. She looked down upon everyone with disdain and walked with her nose held high, as if no one else mattered or was worthy of her attention. When she strode through the village paths in her beautiful, long, flowing dresses, feeling every inch a princess with her shoulders pulled back in haughty pride, no one dared to call her by her name or even stand upright in her presence as she passed. Everyone feared her, for she showed respect to absolutely no one. Neither the young nor the old received a kind word or glance from her. She treated people as though they were dirt beneath her feet, simply because she was betrothed to the prince and wore the lovely dresses that were always generously provided by the royal household. She was constantly surrounded by other young girls who trailed behind her everywhere she went, eagerly awaiting her commands and fulfilling the role of her personal attendants. But they followed her not out of affection or genuine friendship. They followed her because they were terrified of her unpredictable temper and sharp tongue. She forced them to do whatever she wished, and they were bound by fear to keep all her secrets hidden. Zira possessed a terrible temper and was widely known as a bully, always seeking to make others feel small, insignificant, and afraid. The people in the village would whisper amongst themselves, their voices low with worry about what might become of them if she were ever to become their queen. They saw how starkly different she was from Prince Kwame, whom they cherished for his boundless kindness and humble heart. Zira was the complete opposite, a dark cloud compared to his radiant light, and the villagers could only desperately hope that something, anything, might change before it was irrevocably too late. Prince Kwame loved Zira deeply, captivated by her undeniable beauty, yet her character remained a significant problem for him. He constantly heard stories circulating throughout the village about how she treated people, speaking to them and acting as though they were worthless, and this deeply pained him. Occasionally, he would voice his concerns to his parents, who, unfortunately, were so enchanted by Zira's charm and beauty that they could never perceive anything wrong with her actions. To them, she was the sweet, perfect daughter they had never had, and their love for her seemed to blind them to her true nature. One warm, sunny afternoon, Prince Kwame decided that the time was ripe for a serious and heartfelt conversation with his betrothed, Zira. He had always firmly believed that kindness and respect were the most crucial virtues anyone could possess, especially someone destined to become a leader, a future queen. He harbored a sincere hope that if he spoke to her gently and honestly, she might finally understand his perspective and perhaps choose to change her ways. He knew deep in his heart that if they were ever to rule the kingdom together one day, this change in her character was not just important, but absolutely essential for the well-being of his people. To make the conversation feel special and less like a lecture, Prince Kwame decided to prepare a delicious lunch for them. He knew how much Zira adored fish, so he carefully prepared a rich, fragrant fish soup, using the freshest and finest ingredients he could find. He arranged for their meal to be served in the Oba Adebale Royal Garden, a truly exquisite location, brimming with blooming flowers of every hue and shaded by tall, ancient trees that provided a cool, comforting canopy from the sun's heat. The garden was a place of profound peace and tranquility, and he hoped its serene atmosphere would help to set the right mood for their difficult talk. As he settled down to eat, Zira's face lit up with apparent happiness. She seemed genuinely pleased that the prince had taken such thoughtful trouble for her. "This is truly delicious," she exclaimed, taking a satisfied sip of the soup. "How did you learn to cook so wonderfully?" Kwame smiled, a gentle warmth in his eyes, and replied, "My mother is an excellent cook, and I learned by watching her and helping in the royal kitchens." Zira laughed, a bright, joyful sound that instantly made the prince's heart feel lighter. The sunlight filtered through the dense leaves of the trees, casting a soft, dappled glow upon her face, making her appear even more breathtakingly beautiful than usual. Kwame couldn't help but be momentarily captivated by her smile and the way her eyes sparkled and danced in the light. They continued to eat and chat merrily, their laughter filling the peaceful garden, echoing softly off the ancient stone walls. Prince Kwame waited patiently, savoring their seemingly carefree conversation, but also meticulously contemplating the important words he knew he had to speak. After they had finished their meal, They reclined back comfortably in the cool shade of a large, majestic tree. The prince felt that the time had finally arrived. The atmosphere was light and relaxed, and Zira seemed to be in a genuinely good mood. He took a deep, steadying breath and resolved to speak from the very depths of his heart. "My love," he began softly, his voice full of sincerity, "I care for you deeply, more than words can say, but there is something that has been troubling me greatly." Zira looked up, her eyes searching his face, noticing the serious expression that had replaced his earlier smile. Her own smile faded slightly as she asked, a hint of curiosity in her tone. "What is it, my prince? Please, tell me what burdens your heart." Prince Kwame gently took her hands into his own, holding them tenderly. "When I become king, you will be my queen, standing by my side. But a queen, a leader of our people, must possess certain qualities. Kindness and humility are incredibly important virtues to me, ones I believe are essential for good leadership. However, I feel, Zira, that you do not always display these virtues in your interactions with others. I need you to work on this aspect of yourself, to truly strive for change, if we are to rule this kingdom together in harmony." Zira's face stiffened visibly with surprise and a flicker of nascent anger. "What do you mean, my prince?" she asked, her voice suddenly losing its earlier warmth. "Are you suggesting that you will end our betrothal? Our relationship?" "No, no," he replied quickly, his voice rising slightly in urgency and desperation. "I do not wish to end it, but you will leave me with no choice if you do not change, Zira. I love you, truly I do, but I also deeply love my people. I cannot allow the person who is meant to protect them, to lead them with compassion, to become their oppressor instead." At these words, Zira's volatile temper flared like dry kindling. "How dare you speak to me like that?" she spat, her voice suddenly harsh and laced with anger. "Your people do not respect me, and they do not see me as their queen." Kwame remained outwardly calm, though he felt a storm of frustration and disappointment beginning to brew inside him. "That is because you are not their queen yet, at least, not in a way that truly matters," he said firmly, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "Listen, Zira, you must learn to treat others with kindness and compassion, and stop turning them into your personal punching bags. Respect is not something you can demand or force upon people. It is something you earn through your actions, through your character. It comes naturally, freely, when people genuinely love you and hold you in high regard." Zira's face turned a deep crimson with uncontrollable fury. How dare the prince, her own betrothed, speak to her in such a manner? She thought, her mind reeling with indignation. She quickly stood up, her eyes blazing with righteous anger. "I will not stay here to be insulted by you," she shrieked, her voice piercing the peaceful air of the garden. "If the villagers do not respect me, perhaps you should teach them first." With these furious words, she turned sharply and stormed out of the garden, her footsteps heavy with uncontrolled rage, leaving Prince Kwame sitting alone in the quiet shade, wondering with a heavy heart if his words had made any impact at all. Deep down, Prince Kwame understood in that moment that Zira was not, could never be, the woman he envisioned standing by his side as queen. He watched her retreat from him, angry and proud, and felt a profound wave of disappointment wash over his chest, squeezing his heart. He thought of his own mother, Queen Ayabo, and how he had never once seen her storm away from his father in anger or refuse to listen to his counsel. Zira showed no respect, not just to the villagers she disdained, but even to him, the future king. How could someone be so utterly self-absorbed that they wouldn't even accept gentle advice or correction? His mother had always told him that Zira might change as she grew older, that her immaturity would fade, but Kwame was no longer certain. He feared that Zira would never truly change, no matter how much time passed, no matter the circumstances. His heart felt heavy and burdened because he knew his parents would never fully see things from his perspective. They were too enamored by her surface charm. But one thing was crystal clear to him. He could never, under any circumstances, marry a woman with such a cruel and arrogant character. From the day of their heated argument, He and Zira did not speak a single word to each other. Zira visited the palace several times, hoping desperately to see him, but the prince steadfastly refused to speak with her. Oh, the very first time she came, he had thought, perhaps naively, that she had come to apologize, so he had waited, believing she would show some glimmer of remorse or humility for her actions. But instead, she had simply chattered on about other trivial matters, completely ignoring the significant argument that had transpired between them. Prince Kwame felt his heart sink with disappointment. Unable to contain his frustration at her blatant disregard, he quietly stood up and walked away, leaving her alone in the vast, silent royal garden. From that day forward, whenever she arrived at the palace, he simply refused to see her. Meanwhile, the much-anticipated New Yam Festival was rapidly approaching, and the entire village of Kwamiko buzzed and vibrated with infectious excitement. It was undoubtedly the most thrilling and vibrant time of the year, and everyone dedicated themselves wholeheartedly to the elaborate preparations. The New Yam Festival had always been a truly grand and spectacular event. People from numerous different kingdoms were invited to participate, and the celebration was a riot of color, lively music, and joyous dancing that lasted for days. The young girls of the village were particularly thrilled about the approaching festivities. They dressed in their most beautiful and brightly colored outfits, adorned themselves with intricate beads and shimmering ornaments, and diligently rehearsed their dance steps, eager to entertain the esteemed guests. It was their prime opportunity to showcase their youthful beauty, innate grace, and burgeoning talent. The market was more bustling and lively than ever before, with groups of girls flocking together, eagerly purchasing new clothing and special items to adorn themselves, hoping to catch a discerning eye. For them, it was more than just a festival. It was a pivotal chance to potentially find a good, respectable husband. Many young men from distant villages and even the far-off city would return home specifically during this time of year, hoping to find a wife among the beautiful and talented village girls. The girls knew that if they danced exceptionally well and looked their absolute best, they might just capture the attention of a worthy man. Their mothers had often shared heartwarming stories of how they themselves had met their husbands during past New Yam festivals, and the young girls dreamed of finding their own true love in the same romantic, traditional way. Zira, who had been unable to speak with Prince Kwame since their bitter argument, saw the upcoming festival as her perfect, golden opportunity to win him back, to recapture his attention and affection. She decided, with a fierce determination hardening her resolve, that if she danced beautifully, with unparalleled skill and grace, he would be utterly unable to take his eyes off her. She practiced her dance steps tirelessly, ensuring that every single movement was executed with flawless perfection. She spent lavishly on the most expensive clothing and the most exquisite beads, planning to adorn herself like the queen she still believed she was destined to be. Zira knew she was beautiful, undeniably so, and she held the firm belief that if the prince saw her in all her radiant glory, he would be completely unable to resist her charms. In her vivid imagination, she pictured him approaching her, falling to his knees, and humbly begging for her forgiveness for having ignored her for so many days. This thought brought a triumphant smile to her lips, and she felt an overwhelming confidence that the festival would undoubtedly bring them back together, sealing their fate once more. 7 days prior to the festival, the village truly came alive with the building excitement surrounding the masquerades. The masquerades were a truly special and integral part of the celebration, and everyone eagerly anticipated their grand parade. As soon as the villagers heard the loud, rhythmic sound of the gong echoing through the air, its deep resonance vibrating in their chests, they knew that the masquerades were emerging from their secret dwellings. The gong was always swiftly followed by the pulsating beat of the drums, and this particular drum beat was unlike any other sound they heard throughout the year. It was so incredibly lively and powerful that it could stir even the saddest soul, compelling them to move and dance. The villagers absolutely adored this special sound, precisely because they heard it only once a year, just before the festival commenced, and they eagerly awaited its arrival every single time. On this very special day, Ao was positioned beneath the majestic Irako tree, diligently gathering the ripe fruits that had fallen to the soft earth. She needed to sell these precious fruits at the Arya market to earn just enough money for the remaining parts of her eagerly anticipated dancing costume. She had worked tirelessly all day, her hands moving swiftly and efficiently as she filled her woven baskets with the small, round fruits. Then, she heard it, the unmistakable, captivating beat of the drums. The sound felt like pure magic, a sweet, irresistible melody that seemed to penetrate deep into her heart and soul, awakening something within her. Before she could even consciously register what she was doing, she instinctively dropped her basket and began to dance. Her feet seemed to move of their own accord, her waist swaying and twirling in perfect rhythm with the pulsating beat, and she spun around and around with uninhibited joy. From every corner of the village, people could hear the loud, clear, and compelling beat of the drums, beckoning everyone to join in the spontaneous dance. Ao loved to dance more than anything else in the world. For her, dancing was like essential food for her soul, a nourishment she craved. This was precisely why she worked so diligently, gathering fruits and taking on odd jobs, all to earn enough money for her costume and to be able to join the other girls in the communal village dance. As she danced there beneath the shade of the Irako tree, lost in the music, she forgot about everything else around her. Her worries, her tasks, the outside world simply faded away. Her movements were so incredibly graceful and bursting with life that for a moment, she appeared to be the very embodiment of the goddess of dance herself. Her feet moved in perfect harmony with the complex rhythms of the drums, her arms flowed like gentle water currents, and her smile was even brighter and more radiant than the sun shining above. It was at this precise moment that Prince Kwame was returning to the village on his horse from a visit to the Ogun River. As he approached the familiar paths leading into the village, he suddenly saw something that caused him to halt his horse abruptly, stopping dead in his tracks. There, beneath the widespread branches of the Irako tree, a young girl was dancing with such breathtaking beauty and profound grace that he felt his heart inexplicably skip a beat, then pound rapidly in his chest. His jaw dropped open slightly in sheer amazement, and he remained frozen, utterly unable to tear his gaze away from the mesmerizing sight before him. For a fleeting moment, he truly believed he was watching a goddess dancing before his very eyes. He had always considered Zira to be the most beautiful girl in the kingdom, but now, seeing this captivating dancer, he was no longer so certain. This girl, with her fluid movements and radiant smile, seemed to be the very definition of natural beauty and pure joy. A warmth he hadn't felt in a long time filled his heart, and he was overwhelmed by a rush of emotions that he couldn't fully comprehend or explain. He didn't know how long he remained seated on his horse, simply watching her dance, utterly captivated, but he found himself wishing with all his might that she would never, ever stop. Suddenly, his horse neighed loudly, a sharp sound that shattered the magical spell of the moment. Ao instantly stopped dancing, startled by the abrupt noise. She turned around, her eyes wide, and was shocked to see Prince Kwame sitting on his horse, looking directly at her and smiling warmly. Her heart immediately began to race wildly in her chest. Had he been watching her the entire time? How long had he been there? She felt a sudden rush of embarrassment and panic flood over her. Not knowing what else to do, she quickly grabbed her fallen basket and ran away as fast as her legs could carry her. She ran and ran, her feet pounding against the dusty ground, until she finally reached the safety of her small home. Entering inside, she leaned back against the cool wall, her chest heaving heavily as she struggled to catch her breath, her heart still pounding. She felt a confusing mix of emotions, embarrassed that he had seen her dancing so freely, yet strangely thrilled, and perhaps even a little proud that he had stopped to watch. She wasn't sure whether to feel foolish or incredibly fortunate that the prince had witnessed her dancing under the Irako tree. When Prince Kwame returned to the great house of Kwamiko on his horse, his heart felt heavy with a bittersweet ache, and he couldn't stop thinking about the beautiful dancer he had seen beneath the Irako tree. At first, she had seemed like a celestial being, a goddess, moving with such effortless grace and unparalleled beauty that he found it hard to believe she was merely a human woman. He marveled at how the gods could possibly bless just one person with such exquisite elegance and captivating charm. Her image remained etched vividly in his mind, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake off the persistent thoughts of her dancing, her radiant smile, and the way she moved, as if she were being carried effortlessly by the wind itself. While the village bustled with vibrant excitement in anticipation of the festival, and the masquerades danced through the streets, filling the air with infectious joy, Prince Kwame's thoughts were elsewhere entirely. All he could focus on, all he could think about, was the enchanting dancing goddess he had seen that day. He walked to the Irako tree many times in the following days, hoping with a desperate longing to see her again, perhaps even to learn her name, but each time he was met with crushing disappointment. She was never there. He found himself staring intently at the empty space where she had danced, wishing intensely to see her again, even if only for a fleeting moment. Eventually, with a sigh of resignation, he decided he would have to wait for the festival day. Surely, he reasoned, she would be there. No girl, he thought, could possibly miss such a grand and significant event. Finally, the much-anticipated day of the festival arrived, and the village truly came alive, buzzing with vibrant excitement and the sound of happy laughter. The streets were thronged with villagers, many who had returned home from far and wide specifically for this special celebration, which occurred only once a year. It was a sacred time for everyone to gather and offer thanks to the gods for blessing their land and ensuring a bountiful harvest. The air was thick with the tempting aroma of delicious food cooking, the pulsating sound of the drums, and the joyful voices of people greeting each other warmly, embracing friends and family. The girls gathered in excited groups, walking towards the palace with wide, hopeful smiles on their faces, chattering excitedly amongst themselves. Some of them playfully joked, "I am not going home unmarried today." Others laughed and replied, "With so many handsome men around, surely someone is bound to notice me today." They walked with high hopes in their hearts, dressed in their most stunning outfits, their faces glowing with anticipation and dreams of finding a good husband. The celebration commenced with a final, spectacular dance of the masquerades for the year. Their colorful costumes billowed and swayed in perfect time with the resonant beat of the drums. Then, the moment arrived for the girls to perform their traditional dances. The people cheered and applauded enthusiastically as the young women danced gracefully, their steps intricate and perfectly synchronized with the lively music. Prince Kwame sat upon his royal throne, his eyes scanning the crowd, his gaze searching intently for the girl who had danced so exquisitely beneath the Irako tree. He looked past all the other girls, barely even registering Zira or all the elaborate effort she had put into trying to capture his attention. His heart beat faster with a mixture of hope and anticipation, but as the event drew to a close, she was nowhere to be seen. When the celebrations ended and everyone else was immersed in joyous festivities, the prince felt a deep, profound sadness settle upon him. As he returned to his private chambers, he had hoped with all his heart to see her, but she had not appeared. Was she even real? He had heard the old stories of spirits who danced beneath the Irako tree in the daylight hours, and he began to wonder, with a growing sense of unease, if she was one of them. But it didn't matter to him whether she was human or spirit. He simply yearned to see her again. He was utterly captivated by her and longed for just a single glimpse of her radiant smile. Ao had spent weeks preparing diligently for the festival, but the night before, her beloved father had fallen ill. Many years ago, she had tragically lost her mother, and since then, it had always been just her and her father, facing the world together. He was her entire world, her rock, and she couldn't possibly imagine her life without him by her side. Her father, Baba Kofi, saw the worry etched in her eyes and gently pleaded with her to attend the festival. He knew how much it meant to her, how she had looked forward to it, but Ao steadfastly refused. She wanted to stay right by his side, to nurse him back to health, to ensure he had everything he needed. The festival, she reasoned, could wait until next year. Her father's health was her absolute priority now, her greatest concern. They could hear the loud, joyful sound of the drums from where they sat in the shade of a tree outside their small home. The rhythmic beat lifted Ao's spirits slightly, and she decided, with a burst of affection, to dance for her father, just for him. She knew the immense joy it brought him to see her dance, and she wanted to lift his spirits and make him feel happy, even just for a little while. She twirled and swayed with all the grace and beauty she possessed, her movements as light and fluid as a gentle breeze, her face radiant with a smile meant only for him. Baba Kofi watched her, his heart overflowing with deep pride and pure happiness. Ao was the greatest gift life had ever bestowed upon him, and he prayed silently to the gods that they would bless her with a man who would always make her as happy as she made him feel, who would cherish her joy as she cherished his. As she danced, Ao felt a sense of peace settle in her heart, knowing that even though she had missed the grand festival, she had made her father smile, and that, to her, was the most important thing in the world, worth more than any celebration. She was a true source of joy, a beacon of light in her father's life. Zira sat slumped on the ground outside her beautiful home, tears streaming down her face in bitter rivulets. She felt a deep, gnawing sadness in her heart, an icy dread, because she knew, with a terrible certainty, that she was losing the prince, perhaps had already lost him. As she had danced at the festival, she had noticed how distant the prince seemed, how his eyes appeared to be searching the crowd for someone else entirely, not caring at all that she was there, pouring her heart into her dance for him. It was painfully clear that he was serious about casting her aside, but Zira, in her pride and arrogance, simply could not accept it. She clenched her fists tightly, the nails digging into her palms, and muttered fiercely to herself, "The prince will never find another girl in this village. Not now, not ever. He belongs to me." As she sat there, weeping uncontrollably, her mother approached her and sat down beside her, her face filled with worry and sorrow at seeing her daughter in such profound distress. "Why are you weeping, my child?" she asked softly, her voice full of maternal concern. Zira wiped her tears away with the back of her hand and sobbed, her voice thick with misery. "Mother, it is the prince. He is ignoring me, and I do not understand why. Today at the festival, he did not even look at me, not once. His eyes kept searching the crowd, as if he was looking for someone else." "What?" her mother exclaimed, her face registering shock and anger simultaneously. "Does Kwame mean to bring shame upon this family? Have you two quarreled?" "No, mother," Zira replied, shaking her head vehemently. "I did nothing wrong. He simply started avoiding me for no reason at all. Please, speak to father. We cannot allow the prince to treat our family with such utter disrespect. It is unbearable." Her mother sighed deeply, a troubled look on her face, and said, "Do not worry yourself, my dearest. I will speak to your father when he returns from the farm tomorrow. We will go to the palace together and find out exactly what is happening. Kwame would not dare to shame us like this. How could he possibly cast you aside when everyone in the village respects us, and everyone is eagerly awaiting your coronation as queen?" The following day, Chief Jabulani and his wife set off for the palace. When they arrived, the king greeted them warmly, his face alight with hospitality. "How is our future queen doing today?" he inquired, his voice jovial, after they had settled down comfortably. "That is exactly what we have come to ask the prince about," Chief Jabulani replied, his voice firm and laced with underlying tension. "Zira tells us that the prince is ignoring her, and she is greatly distressed by his behavior." "No, this cannot be," the king exclaimed, a frown creasing his brow. He quickly sent for Prince Kwame and Queen Ayabo, eager to understand the situation. When they were all gathered together in the royal chambers, the king turned to his son and began, "Kwame, my son, what is happening between you and your betrothed? There are concerns." Kwame had anticipated this conversation for some time. Ever since he had seen the captivating girl dancing beneath the Irako tree, his thoughts had shifted entirely, and Zira had faded from his mind. He took a deep breath and cleared his throat, preparing himself. He had always obeyed his father's wishes, but this time, He was resolved to stand his ground, to speak his truth. "Father, I cannot marry Zira," he stated firmly, his voice steady and unwavering. "She has not been raised properly, and she shows no respect for others, for her own people. You know how much I deeply love our people, and I cannot, in good conscience, marry someone who would treat them poorly, who would become their oppressor." The king listened carefully, knowing his son's character well, but he still harbored the belief that Zira was merely immature and would improve with time and guidance. "Son," he said gently, trying to reason with him, "all you need to do is guide her, teach her, call her to order when she errs. Perhaps she does not understand how her actions make you feel, how they are perceived by others. Remember, she is still very young. There is time for her to learn." "I have tried," Kwame replied, his voice filled with palpable frustration and disappointment. "But she refused to accept correction and even stormed away from me in anger. She has not offered a single apology since. I no longer have any interest in pursuing a relationship with her. She needs to learn humility and good manners, and I cannot be the one to teach her." He stood up, his face set with unwavering determination. "I request your permission to leave," he said, bowing respectfully, and with that, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving his parents and the chief's family in silence. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the room after Kwame's departure. The king and queen exchanged long, troubled glances. They had never before seen their son so clearly angry and resolute. Chief Jabulani and his wife sat stiffly, their hearts seething with indignation, feeling deeply insulted by the prince's blunt words. Finally, the queen, ever the diplomat, broke the silence. "Chief," she said softly, her voice tinged with concern, "I believe it would be wise for you to speak with your daughter, Zira. I, myself, will speak with my son, Kwame. Do not worry too much. I am confident he will come to his senses. Perhaps he was just upset." Chief Jabulani's wife, Emma, was practically boiling with suppressed fury as they left the palace and walked towards their home. "The prince would not dare to shame our family like this," she cried out, her voice trembling with indignation. "And you, Jabulani, you just sat there, saying absolutely nothing to defend our daughter. It is unacceptable. Hold your tongue, woman." Chief Jabulani snapped back, his voice heavy with frustration and anger. "I warned you repeatedly that our daughter was growing up ill-mannered and spoiled, but you did not listen to my counsel. Now look at where it has led us. How dares Zira storm away from the prince like that? Do you not understand that such behavior is considered sacrilege, an insult to the royal family? You had better speak with her immediately, because she is the reason Kwame just called us irresponsible fools right to our faces. And it is all you're doing, your fault." They argued fiercely all the way back to their home, their voices rising in angry accusation, the sound carrying in the quiet evening air. Days bled into weeks, yet nothing seemed to change in the strained relationship between Zira and the prince. Zira, seeing that the prince had indeed distanced himself from her, attempted to apologize to him, but he consistently refused to see her or even listen to her words. Then, she decided to give him some space, as the queen had suggested, hoping absence would make his heart grow fonder. However, even with the passage of time, Zira still did not make any real changes to her behavior. She continued to walk through the village, bullying others and treating them as though they were beneath her, using her perceived status as a weapon. She acted as if nothing significant had happened, and everyone in the village began to wonder if she would ever truly learn her lesson, if humility was a concept she was simply incapable of grasping. One bright, sunny afternoon, Prince Kwame was taking a leisurely stroll through the village, as he often did, greeting people with his usual warmth and enjoying the pleasant heat of the day. As he walked along the familiar dusty paths, he suddenly spotted her, the beautiful girl who had occupied his thoughts ever since he first saw her dancing beneath the irako tree. His heart leaped with sudden excitement as he watched her approach him. She was carrying a basket laden with vegetables and other provisions, and he realized she must be returning from the Arya market, her daily chores completed. He had searched for her for so long, hoping for just one more chance to see her face, and now, finally, she was here, walking towards him. It felt like a true blessing from the gods, a moment he had longed for. He stopped his horse, his face breaking into a radiant smile as he offered her a warm and heartfelt greeting. Ao, however, felt a wave of shyness wash over her. She wasn't sure how to act or what to say in the presence of the prince. She knew he was a kind and gentle man. Everyone in the village spoke of his good heart, but she couldn't understand why he seemed to be so interested in her, a simple commoner. Her heart hammered rapidly in her chest as she looked up at him, her gaze meeting his. "Greetings, my prince," she said softly, dipping her head respectfully in a traditional gesture of deference. "Greetings to you, O blessed one," Prince Kwame replied, his smile widening genuinely. "You seem to be returning from the market. How are you today?" "I am well, my prince," Ao replied, her voice barely above a whisper, still feeling overwhelmed by his attention. Prince Kwame did not wish to startle her or make her feel uncomfortable, so he chose his words carefully, speaking gently. He wanted her to feel at ease, to see that he meant no harm, and perhaps, just perhaps, to coax another smile from her. "I would be honored to know your name," he said softly, his tone kind and inviting. "Are you from this kingdom?" "Yes, my prince," she replied, nodding her head shyly. "My name is Ao." "What a beautiful name," he said, his eyes shining with genuine admiration. "It suits a beautiful girl like you perfectly. I was truly captivated watching you dance the other day, and I have searched for you endlessly since then. I would very much like to see you dance again if you would be willing. Could you do that for me?" Ao's face lit up with a sudden, radiant smile, and Prince Kwame's heart gave a sharp, joyful pang. This was the smile he had dreamt of seeing for so many weeks. Seeing it now, directed at him, filled him with an unexpected rush of happiness. "No one can say no to the prince," Ao replied, her voice soft and sweet like honey. "It would be my pleasure to dance for you, if it would make you happy." A wave of pure excitement surged through Prince Kwame. "Then let us make an arrangement," he said with boundless enthusiasm. "Tomorrow evening, we will meet again at that magical spot where I first saw you dancing beneath the irako tree." "Thank you so very much for granting my wish, Ao. It means more to me than you can possibly imagine." With a grateful smile and a light wave of his hand, the prince turned his horse and rode back towards the palace, his heart dancing with uncontainable joy. He could barely wait for the next day to arrive. He felt as though he had found something truly extraordinary, something precious, and he spent the remaining hours counting down the moments until he would see her again. And so began the blossoming friendship between Prince Kwame and Ao, a bond that unfolded and deepened like a beautiful flower opening its petals to the sun. Every day, as the sun began its descent towards the horizon, casting long shadows, they would meet beneath the ancient irako tree, where their connection grew stronger with each passing moment. Prince Kwame possessed a special talent for playing the odu, a type of flute that produced the most enchanting, sweet sounds, and Ao was the perfect partner for his music. Her graceful dance steps seemed to dance, with the melodies he played, her body moving with such natural elegance that it appeared as though she were being carried effortlessly by the wind itself. These clandestine meetings became their cherished daily evening ritual. Each evening, as the sky was painted in the warm, vibrant hues of pink and orange, they would sit together in the cool, comforting shade of the irako tree. Prince Kwame felt as though he were living in a dream, a beautiful, peaceful dream. The time he spent with Ao was undoubtedly the happiest of his life. He found himself eagerly anticipating their time together, counting down the hours until he would see her radiant face and her captivating movements again. It was then that he realized he wanted more than just to observe her dance. He craved her friendship, her laughter, and most profoundly, he wanted her love. He wanted Ao to be a permanent, integral part of his life, forever. However, not everything remained unnoticed within the close-knit village community. Some of the villagers had, on several occasions, seen the prince and Ao together beneath the irako tree, sharing quiet moments. Whispers, like dry leaves skittering across the ground, quickly spread throughout the village. Some villagers were pleased by this development, especially those who had long disliked Zira and were weary of her arrogant and entitled behavior. They secretly hoped that this new friendship would finally bring Zira crashing back down to earth, humbling her in a way nothing else seemed capable of doing. But others, those who were fiercely loyal to Zira and her family, were not happy at all. They hurried to her, eager to share the scandalous news that the prince was spending time with another, a common girl from the village, right before the eyes of everyone. Zira's face darkened with uncontrolled fury as she heard the news. Her eyes narrowed and her lips tightened into a thin line. "This cannot be true," she shrieked, her voice trembling with intense rage. "Kwame cannot do this to me. He cannot humiliate me in this way, not in front of the entire village. It is unbearable." She felt a burning fire of jealousy and anger consuming her from within, knowing that the prince, the one she believed was rightfully hers, might be slipping through her grasp. She knew she had to act swiftly and decisively. She needed to do something, anything, to prevent this from happening. She was fiercely determined that no other girl would take her destined place by the prince's side. It was now unmistakably clear to Zira that the prince had indeed distanced himself from her. She could no longer deny the truth of what she had heard, the persistent whispers throughout the village, the knowing glances people cast in her direction. She felt a storm of uncontrollable anger and bitter resentment brewing within her, and that night, she could no longer contain it. With fury burning hot in her heart, she stormed into the palace grounds, her footsteps heavy and rapid against the stone paths. Reaching the main gate, she began to scream the prince's name at the top of her lungs, her voice raw with emotion. "Kwame, Kwame, come out now. You cannot abandon me like this. Not in front of the entire village. You coward." Her loud, desperate cries echoed through the palace walls, instantly attracting the attention of the king and queen. They hurried out, their faces etched with concern, eager to discover the source of such an unprecedented disturbance. They found Zira standing there, her face flushed red and contorted with rage, still screaming the prince's name, tears streaming down her cheeks. Prince Kwame had not yet returned to the palace for the evening. "What is happening, Zira?" the queen asked softly, her voice soothing, attempting to calm the distraught girl. "Why are you shouting like this, disturbing the peace?" "It is the prince," Zira cried out, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger, hurt, and bitter tears. "He is seeing another girl in this village. He has cast me aside. He has abandoned me." Her immense pride had been shattered, and she felt her entire world collapsing around her. She could not possibly imagine a life without the royal privileges she had always dreamed of, the life she had prepared for. She could already, in her mind, hear the villagers laughing at her, mocking her downfall. Just at that moment, they heard the distinctive sound of hooves, and Prince Kwame rode into the palace courtyard on his horse. As soon as Zira saw him, she lunged towards him, her face twisted with furious accusation. "You cheater," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "How dare you see another girl in this village?" Prince Kwame held her gaze steadily, looking directly into her furious eyes. "It is over between us, Zira," he said firmly, his voice calm but decisive. "I cannot possibly have someone with your cruel and disrespectful character as my queen. Your behavior is despicable, utterly unacceptable. You need to work on yourself, on your character, and then perhaps you can prepare yourself for the next man who comes along. I am finished with this."
"No."
"You do not mean that," the king exclaimed, stepping forward, utterly shocked by his son's blunt words. "Father," Kwame replied, his voice even and resolute. "She has refused to change, despite my attempts to help her see the importance of kindness and humility. And I can no longer continue with her. My decision is final." Zira felt her knees buckle beneath her, and she sank to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably, begging the prince, tears streaming down her face like a waterfall. She felt as though her entire life, everything she had ever believed and worked towards, was crashing down around her, dissolving into nothingness. She had grown up firmly believing she was destined to be the queen, living like a princess, preparing for a future on the throne, And now, just like this, it was all slipping through her fingers like grains of sand. The king and queen stood there, watching helplessly. They knew their son had made his decision, and there was little they could do now to change his mind. They gently asked Zira to return home, assuring her that they would speak with Kwame again and try to persuade him to reconsider. But Zira was not listening. Her heart was overflowing with bitter resentment and a burning, vengeful rage. "Who is this girl who dares to take my place?" she shrieked, her voice raw with fury. "I swear by the gods, I will kill her. I will kill her with my own hands." As Zira stormed away from the palace, her footsteps quick and angry, her face was dark with palpable rage. The villagers who saw her approaching knew instinctively to step aside, to make way for her, giving her a wide berth. They saw the storm brewing in her eyes and knew it was best to stay far away from her path. Zira began to question people throughout the village, her voice demanding, desperately trying to find out the identity of the girl who had captured Prince Kwame's attention. When she finally learned that it was Ao, the simple, poor girl, she couldn't believe it. "That poor, dirty creature," she shrieked, her voice filled with contemptuous anger. "Kwame chose that rag over me? I will not let him have her. Not while I am still alive. It will never happen." She began to spy and lurk around Ao, using her loyal attendants to help her. Ao went to the farm every single morning, walking along a narrow, solitary path that cut through the dense thickets of bushes. It was a quiet, seldom used route, with tall, thick trees lining both sides, and few people ever passed through it at that hour. Zira decided that she and her group of compliant friends would hide there, concealed by the dense foliage, and wait for Ao. They would teach her a brutal lesson, one she would never, ever forget. That morning, Ao left her small home, humming a cheerful tune, her heart light, as she made her way towards the farm. She felt happy and peaceful, completely unaware of the terrible trouble that lay waiting for her ahead. As she entered the narrow path, she heard a strange sound, like the rustling of leaves just behind her. Before she could even turn her head to see where the noise was coming from, Zira and her group of girls sprang out from their hiding place, rushing towards her. They caught her completely by surprise, knocking her brutally to the ground, and set upon her with a savage fury, kicking and hitting her with all their strength. Ao cried out, trying desperately to protect herself, but there were too many of them, their blows raining down on her. She screamed, pleading with them to stop, begging for mercy, but they were consumed by their own rage and simply would not listen. "You thief!" they shrieked. "You are humiliating Ao." Zira stood over her, her voice filled with vengeful fury. "How dare you take what is rightfully mine?" she screamed. "Do you not know who I am in this village? I am warning you now. Stay far away from the prince. This is just a small taste, a warning. If I ever see you near him again, you will regret it for the rest of your life. You need to know exactly what I am capable of doing," she threatened, her eyes blazing. "I will make you disappear from this earth," she said, her voice chillingly cold and menacing. Then, she let out a laugh, a cruel, sharp, and deeply unpleasant sound that prompted the other girls to join in with her, their laughter echoing in the quiet woods. When they were finished with their brutal assault, they left Ao lying on the ground, bruised and in pain, tears streaming down her face as she slowly, trembling, managed to push herself back to her feet. When Ao finally managed to make her way back home, bruised and shaken, she tearfully recounted everything that had happened to her father, Baba Kofi. His face grew sorrowful, and his shoulders slumped with the heavy weight of worry. "Ao, my dearest," he said softly, his voice gentle and full of concern. "We are merely commoners in this village, simple folk. I think it would be best if you stayed away from the prince, my child. This is not a battle you can possibly win, and I cannot bear the thought of losing you, my only precious child. I believe there will be another good man, a kind man, who will come along and love you very much, someone without such dangerous complications." Ao nodded, tears still glistening in her eyes. She knew, with a heavy heart, that her father was right. Even though the prince had not explicitly asked her to be with him, to be his love. She understood that she needed to keep her distance from him, for her own safety and for her father's. She was the only family her father had left in the world, and she knew, with a chilling certainty, that Zira was deadly serious about her threats. She would not risk her father's life, or her own, for the sake of her feelings for the prince. That evening, Prince Kwame sat beneath the Iroko tree with his Odu flute in his hand, eagerly awaiting his new friend, Ao. He was carefully contemplating how he would finally tell her how he truly felt, the depth of his emotions for her. He wanted to share his heart with her, to let her know that she had completely captivated his soul. But as he sat there, waiting patiently, the minutes ticked by, and there was no sign of her. He waited and waited, his eyes constantly scanning the path, hoping to see her familiar figure emerge from the twilight. The sky began to darken overhead, and a growing sense of worry gnawed at him. Perhaps something had delayed her, he thought. Perhaps she was simply running late and was already on her way. Then, he heard approaching footsteps, and his heart leaped with renewed excitement. He eagerly looked in the direction of the sound, hoping beyond hope that it was Ao, but as the figure drew closer, he realized with a sinking feeling that it was not her. It was someone else entirely, someone he knew all too well. It was Zira. "So, this is where you come," Zira said, her voice heavy with pain and accusation, bitterness lacing every word. "What are you doing here, Zira?" Prince Kwame asked, the disappointment evident in his voice. He had not expected to see her, not here, not now. "Is that the question you should be asking?" Zira retorted, raising her voice, her anger escalating. "I am still betrothed to you, Kwame, and what you are doing, meeting other girls secretly, is an act of betrayal against me. You shame me." "I was but a child when my parents betrothed me to you," Kwame replied calmly, his voice steady despite the rising tension. "I've tried to love you all these years, Zira, truly I have, but I simply cannot, be with a woman who behaves as you do, who treats others with such cruelty and contempt." These words, calm as they were, provoked Zira beyond measure, and without warning, Zira raised her hand and sharply slapped the prince across the face. Prince Kwame stared at her in stunned silence, his eyes wide with utter disbelief. "Tell me," she shrieked, tears streaming down her face, her voice cracking with emotion. "Is she better than me? What is it you see in that cheap rag, Kwame? Why have you chosen to humiliate me in this way, before everyone?" Prince Kwame's own anger flared hot and fierce within him. For a brief, intense moment, he felt an overwhelming urge to lash out, to strike back, to beat her until she could barely breathe, to make her feel a fraction of the pain she had caused. But he remembered the lessons of his upbringing, the values his parents had instilled in him. Never, ever lay a hand on a woman, no matter how provoked, no matter how angry you might be. He stared coldly at Zira, his gaze hard, and turned to walk away from her, needing to escape her toxic presence. But just as he turned to leave, Zira's voice, sharp and venomous, cut through the night air, stopping him dead in his tracks. "Kwame, you have just drawn a line in the sand," she said, her voice filled with simmering rage and bitter determination. "Since you have chosen to humiliate me and my family before this entire village, know this. It will be over my dead body that you get to be with any other girl from this village. Mark my words." A cold shiver ran down Prince Kwame's spine. He knew Zira well enough to know that she never made empty threats. As he rode back to the great house of Kwamiko that night, two things weighed heavily on his mind, pressing down on his spirit: the safety and well-being of Ao, the girl he was falling for, and the terrifying seriousness of Zira's final, chilling threat. He worried endlessly about what Zira, in her boundless rage and bitterness, might do. The king and queen were sitting quietly in the palace chambers when Prince Kwame entered. His face was taut with contained anger, and his footsteps were quick and heavy, betraying the turmoil within him. They knew immediately that something significant was troubling him, something deeply serious. "What has happened, my son?" the queen asked softly, her face full of maternal concern, as she leaned forward, looking intently into his eyes. Kwame sat down heavily, then took a deep, shaky breath before looking at his parents, his gaze meeting theirs. "Father, mother," he began, his voice steady despite the tremor beneath, but filled with respect. "I know that you both care deeply for me, for my happiness, but the peace and well-being of this kingdom are equally important. I have considered this matter long and hard, and I have come to a decision. I want us to formally and officially break the betrothal between Zira and myself. Yes, I know the agreement between our families is a long-standing one, but it must be broken now. I no longer wish to see her near me, ever again. My mind is made up," he finished, his voice resonating with unwavering determination. The king and queen exchanged a long, thoughtful look. They could see clearly how serious their son was. His expression, his tone, everything about him spoke of a decision that had been reached after much internal struggle. They knew that for Prince Kwame to speak in such a manner, something profoundly serious, something deeply disturbing, must have transpired. Before, they had attempted to persuade him to give Zira another chance, believing she could change, but now, seeing him like this, they understood that he had made a final, irreversible decision. They cared deeply for his happiness, their only son, and it was abundantly clear now that Zira was not the woman who could provide that happiness or be a suitable queen. "We understand, my son," the king finally said, slowly nodding his head in acceptance. "We will arrange a meeting with Zira's family soon to discuss this matter formally. You have been a good and obedient son, Kwame, and above all else, we want you to be happy. Your happiness is our priority." The queen reached out a hand and gently took Kwame's hand in hers, her touch comforting. "Yes, we have heard you, our dear son," she added softly. "And we will do what is necessary to ensure your peace and the kingdom's future." They both looked at their son with love and profound understanding, knowing that this was not an easy decision for him, but believing, in their hearts, that it was the right one for him and for the future of their people. Zira sat huddled beneath the large tree in front of their beautiful home, weeping bitterly and uncontrollably. Her face was streaked with tears, and she refused all attempts to be comforted. She had been sitting there for 3 long, agonizing days, ever since the news of her betrothal to the prince had been officially broken. Her heart felt as though it had been shattered into 1,000 tiny, irreparable pieces. Her entire family was consumed by sadness and a deep sense of despair. No one seemed capable of finding the right words to console one another or ease the collective pain. It was the most terrible, humiliating shame they had ever been forced to confront, and it felt as though a heavy, dark cloud had permanently settled over their home, casting everything in shadow. Word of the broken betrothal spread like wildfire throughout the village, and it seemed that was all anyone could talk about. The villagers couldn't stop whispering and giggling amongst themselves at night. When the girls gathered under the moonlight to chat and gossip, it had become their favorite story to recount, a tale of pride's downfall. They laughed loudly, openly mocking Zira, sometimes even mimicking the arrogant way she used to walk, with her nose perpetually in the air. "Now she is just like the rest of us," they would say, tears streaming down their faces from laughter. "Her pride has brought her low, exactly as we predicted." They clapped their hands together and laughed until their sides ached. While Zira grieved and suffered her humiliation, the villagers seemed almost to be celebrating, secretly overjoyed to see the once haughty almost queen of their kingdom fall so hard and so spectacularly to the ground. Zira's mother also did not escape the mocking whispers. When she went to the market, the village women would whisper and giggle behind her back, sometimes even saying cruel, hurtful words just loud enough for her to overhear. It was a profound and public shame for her family, and everywhere they went, they felt the sting of people's laughter and the heavy weight of their ridicule. Each day that passed, Prince Kwame grew increasingly worried. He had not seen Ao for several days now, and his heart felt heavy with a gnawing sense of unease and concern. He couldn't stop thinking about her, wondering endlessly what might have gone wrong, why she hadn't come to meet him. Finally, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, he decided he had to go to her home and find out for himself. He called for 2 of his most trusted guards to accompany him and had the royal carriage loaded with gifts, fine cloths, baskets of exotic fruits, and precious ornaments. He was determined to find the woman who had stolen his heart and was driving him mad with longing for her presence. When the prince arrived at Ao's humble home, he saw her father, Baba Kofi, sitting outside, his elderly face etched with worry, sharpening a tool. As soon as Kofi noticed the prince and his royal escort approaching, his face grew serious, his brow furrowing into a deep line of concern. Although everyone in the village knew that Prince Kwame was a kind and just man, possessing a good heart, Kofi still felt a natural unease, a protective instinct stirring within him. Ao was his only child, his entire world, and he felt an immense responsibility to protect her from any potential harm, especially harm that might come from her association with royalty. The prince approached him with a warm, gentle smile and greeted him politely, his voice respectful. "I have come to see your daughter," he said, his tone calm and courteous. Baba Kofi looked up at him, and the expression on his face made it clear that he was not pleased by this visit. "My prince," he began slowly, his voice hesitant. "I am honored by your presence here, but we do not wish to have anything further to do with you or the palace. My daughter does not wish to see you." A wave of shock and deep confusion washed over Kwame. Had he done something wrong? He had initially thought perhaps Ao was ill, which was why she hadn't come to meet him, but now it was clear that she was deliberately avoiding him. "I care for your daughter very deeply," he finally managed to say, his voice thick with genuine emotion. "I mean her no harm whatsoever. My intentions are pure and honorable," he added, his words almost pleading. Baba Kofi sighed deeply, his eyes filled with paternal worry. "Ao is all that I have left in this world," he replied, his voice strained. "And I cannot, in good conscience, allow anything to happen to her. You were betrothed to another, my prince, and it is not proper for you to care for someone else, especially a commoner. I have broken that betrothal, and it is now official," the prince quickly interrupted, wanting to make that clear. Baba Kofi saw the sincerity and genuine love in the prince's eyes, but fear still gripped his heart like a vice. "I am not certain that Zira has truly left you alone, my prince," he said, his voice tight with apprehension. "She gathered some girls and attacked Ao on the path to the farm, beating her quite badly. She warned her to stay away from you, and even threatened to make her disappear completely. My prince, I implore you, find another girl in this village, one without these dangerous connections, and leave my daughter in peace. I could not bear to lose her. It would break me." Anger, hot and righteous, boiled up inside Prince Kwame at the thought of Zira's cruelty. "I will protect her," he said firmly, his voice resolute. "I will not force her to love me. But if she chooses to give me her heart, I will guard her with my very life and ensure that no harm ever comes to her or her family. You have my solemn word as your future king." The anger continued to simmer within him as he thought about what Zira had done, the violence she had inflicted. How dare she hurt the woman he cared for, the woman he was falling in love with? After a long, tense pause, Baba Kofi finally, reluctantly, agreed to allow the prince to see Ao. When Prince Kwame finally saw her, sitting there, his heart swelled with overwhelming emotion. It was as though he was seeing the very air he needed to breathe in that moment. He realized then, with absolute certainty, how deeply and profoundly he wanted her to be a part of his life, now and forever. He handed her the gifts he had brought, and she accepted them with a grateful, shy smile. They sat together in the shade of the tree, and the prince poured out his heart to her, confessing his feelings. He told her how much he loved her, how she had filled his thoughts every single day they were apart, how he longed for her presence. Ao listened intently, her heart beating rapidly in her chest. She, too, had fallen deeply in love with him. She had never stopped thinking about him, the kind prince, but she knew she had to be cautious, for her father's sake, for their safety. "My prince," she said, looking worried, her voice soft. "I have nothing to offer you. I am just a poor girl, a commoner, left to care for an old man who needs my attention and care. Besides, I do not want any trouble with Zira." You know how she can be, how volatile and dangerous. She threatened me, and I am truly afraid, especially after the beating I received." The prince moved closer to her, taking her hands in his own, looking directly into her eyes. "I will protect you with my very life," he said again, his voice earnest and reassuring. "I will ensure that no trouble, no harm, ever comes near you or your family. You have my word, my solemn promise." Ao remained silent for a moment, trying to process everything the prince had just told her. Why had the prince chosen her, out of all the beautiful and eligible girls in the village, from noble families? What could she possibly offer him? A prince destined for a throne. The prince, seeing the hesitation and fear in her eyes, squeezed her hands gently as he spoke. "Ao, tell me truthfully, do you love me?" Ao stayed silent, hesitating, afraid to voice the feelings she held for the prince. "Do you love me?" he asked again, his voice gentle but persistent. Ao nodded slowly, her gaze meeting his. "I do love you, my prince," she said, her voice barely a whisper, but clear. "Then look at me now," he said, his eyes reflecting his sincerity. "Believe me when I tell you that I will protect you. I will protect you with every fiber of my soul, with all my strength," the prince assured her, his words heartfelt. "If you wish for 1,000 escorts, I will provide them for you, always by your side." This earnest declaration, coupled with the image of 1,000 escorts, made Ao giggle. She saw his face, saw how incredibly serious he seemed, as if he meant every single word he uttered. They spent the remainder of the day talking, laughing, and sharing stories beneath the tree. Ao was a very shy girl, but the prince possessed a special knack for making her laugh and encouraging her to speak, drawing her out of her shell. Before the prince left that evening, he pleaded with her, "Please, Ao, dance for me, just once, while I play my ode to you." He had missed her dancing so desperately, the way she moved so gracefully, like a gentle breeze, melting his heart in a way he couldn't fully understand. From where he sat, Baba Kofi watched them together, and a slow, heartfelt smile spread across his face. He saw the light and happiness shining brightly in his daughter's eyes, a radiant glow that he knew so well. His daughter was in love, truly in love, and it warmed his heart immensely to see her so undeniably happy. The days and weeks that followed were filled with overflowing happiness for the two lovers. Prince Kwame hardly spent a day without seeing Ao, and they made their relationship openly known to the entire village. They were always seen together, walking along the village paths hand in hand, or sitting quietly by the banks of the Ogun River, watching the peaceful water flow by and enjoying the cool, refreshing evening breeze. They would chat and laugh together, lost in their own world, as if they didn't have a single care or worry in the world. Prince Kwame deeply adored Ao, and it was evident to anyone who saw them together. His affection for her radiated outwards. He treated her as though she were the most precious treasure in the entire world, always gentle, always kind, always ensuring she felt special and cherished. In Ao, he had found true love and genuine happiness, something he had never fully experienced before, not like this, and he simply couldn't get enough of her presence. Ao, who had once been merely an ordinary girl in the village, was now known and loved by everyone. The villagers had quickly come to cherish her, for she treated everyone with kindness and genuine respect, regardless of their status. She always greeted people with a warm, sincere smile and displayed a humble friendliness that made people feel good, feel valued, in her presence. She was everything they had hoped Zira would be, but which Zira had never shown herself to be. One evening, as they were sitting together by the tranquil banks of the Ogun River, Prince Kwame turned to Ao, a serious expression in his eyes. "I want you to meet my parents," he said softly, his voice filled with significance. "What?" Ao exclaimed, her heart suddenly pounding with a mixture of excitement and apprehension, fear quickly mingling with her joy. "What are you so afraid of, my love?" the prince asked gently, noticing the sudden worry etched on her face. "I do not know," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I am not sure that they will accept me, a commoner." And why would you think that? Prince Kwame asked tenderly, taking her hands in his again. Because I am just a commoner, she said quietly, her gaze lowered. I am nobody of importance in this village. Perhaps they will not think highly of me. The prince chuckled softly, a warm sound, and said, You are not just a commoner anymore, Ao. Do you not see the way the villagers look at you, the respect in their eyes when we walk together? You are just as important as I am now, my love, and my parents are eagerly looking forward to meeting you. Ao's eyes widened in surprise. They want to see me? She asked, almost in disbelief. Yes, they do, the prince replied with a loving smile. They asked to meet you themselves. I am certain they will love you, if for no other reason than for the immense happiness you have brought into my life. The night before her important visit to the palace, Ao's father, Baba Kofi, couldn't stop giving her advice, his face serious with concern. Be yourself, my dearest daughter, he said sternly, emphasizing his words. Do not try to be someone you are not, just to please them. Remember, the palace is very beautiful and filled with many precious things, expensive ornaments. Do not touch anything, child. We could never afford to pay if you broke something valuable. Do not drink too much or eat too much food, and do not openly admire things too eagerly. Remember, they're simply wanting to see if you are suitable for their son, if you fit into their world. Ao laughed softly, looking at how serious her father appeared as he gave her these earnest instructions, born of love and worry. Do not worry, Papa, she reassured him, her voice gentle. You have raised me well, and I will do exactly as you say. I will be mindful. The following evening, the prince arrived to pick up Ao in the grand royal carriage. Ao looked absolutely stunning, radiant, in a beautiful dress that Prince Kwame had gifted her especially for the occasion. He wanted her to look her absolute best for this important visit. When they arrived at the palace, the king and queen greeted her with genuine warmth and hospitality. As soon as they saw Ao, her natural grace and beauty, they smiled at each other, a shared look of approval, and whispered softly to their son, She will make a beautiful queen indeed. The rest of the evening was filled with pure joy. They ate delicious, elaborate food, talked and laughed together effortlessly, going out of their way to make Ao feel comfortable and completely at home in the opulent surroundings. Ao felt all her previous fear and apprehension simply melt away. She was not accustomed to such a luxurious way of life, to the grandeur of the palace, but she remembered her father's wise counsel and remained calm, composed, and humble throughout the entire evening. The king and queen were visibly impressed by her natural grace and modest demeanor, and Prince Kwame's heart swelled with immense happiness, knowing that he had chosen wisely, that she was perfect. Zira had heard about the prince's new love, about his relationship with a commoner girl, and the news felt like a sharp knife twisting in her heart. She, who had once walked through the village with her head held high, confidently believing she would soon be queen, now felt her wings clipped, her aspirations crushed, and she could no longer present herself as the future queen. Her heart was filled to the brim with bitter resentment, gnawing anger, and a deep, burning jealousy. It was the most profound and humiliating shame she had ever endured. She had been so incredibly close to becoming the next queen of her village, of this great kingdom, but suddenly, in an instant, she was reduced to being just like any other ordinary girl. One day, hiding behind a thicket of bushes, she watched as Prince Kwame and Ao sat together, talking and laughing happily, their joy evident to anyone who saw them. She felt her heart ache with a potent mix of pain and consuming jealousy. I will not give him to you, she whispered fiercely to herself, her voice tight with suppressed rage. Not now, not ever. I would rather die first before I let that happen. Weeks passed, and life in the village seemed to settle back into a deceptive calm. The prince was clearly planning to settle down with Ao, although people still whispered quietly about them around the palace grounds. It was during this time, on a particularly hot and sweltering day, that Ao returned home from the farm feeling tired and covered in sweat. She noticed there was no water left in the house, so she decided, despite the heat, to walk to the Ogun River to fetch some. As she walked along the dusty paths towards the river, the air was still and heavy, the only sounds the rustling of leaves under her feet and the occasional chirp of a bird. This was not surprising, as few people ventured out to fetch water under the scorching midday sun. When Ao finally reached the cool, clear river, she knelt down and dipped her pitcher into the water. But just as she was about to fill it, she heard a voice call out from behind her. Her heart leaped into her throat, and she quickly spun around. It was Zira. "Look who we have here," Zira hissed, a cruel, malicious smile playing on her lips. Ao tried to ignore her, gripping her pitcher, ready to turn and leave, but Zira stepped directly in front of her, blocking her path. For other girls, Zira's constant companions and obedient followers stood behind her, their faces expressionless, ready to do her bidding without question. "Where do you think you are going?" Zira demanded, her voice cold and harsh, cutting through the stillness. "Did you think I was joking when I told you to stay away from my man last time? But you didn't listen, did you, commoner?" "Please, Zira," Ao pleaded softly, her voice timid. "Do not dare call me by my name." Zira snapped, her eyes blazing with intense fury. "I am your queen, and you will show me respect. Kneel down right now, you insolent girl." Ao stood her ground, however, her voice steady and calm as she replied, "I have done nothing wrong to you, Zira. The betrothal between you and the prince has been broken. Why are you punishing me? I did not steal your man. He chose to end things with you." Zira's face contorted with a savage rage, and her hand flew up, slapping Ao hard across the face, the sting immediate and sharp. "How dare you remind me of my pain?" she shrieked, her voice raw. "How dare you speak to me like that?" The other girls quickly joined in, and together they pushed Ao with all their might, shoving her brutally off the riverbank and into the deep, dark water of the Ogun River. They stood on the riverbank, watching with cold eyes as Ao struggled in the water, her arms flailing desperately as she tried to stay afloat, her head bobbing up and down. "I cannot let him have you," Zira screamed, her voice filled with a terrifying, almost insane madness. Ao continued to struggle, fighting for her life, her body growing weak, but slowly, tragically, her head disappeared beneath the surface of the water, and she was gone from sight. "If I cannot have him," Zira declared, pounding her fist against her chest again, a look of twisted triumph on her face, "then he will not be with anyone else from this village." She spun around to face the girls standing behind her, their faces pale and stricken with abject fear at what they had just witnessed. "Not a single word of this must ever reach the village," she commanded, her voice low but laced with chilling menace. "If anyone breathes a word, if anyone talks, you will all be finished. Your lives will be forfeit." The girls quickly nodded their heads, their hearts hammering wildly in their chests with terror, knowing that they had no choice whatsoever but to obey Zira's terrifying command. It was late, and Baba Kofi was growing increasingly worried. His daughter, Ao, had been gone for hours. She had gone to the Ogun River to fetch water that afternoon, but she usually never stayed away for so long, especially when there were chores to be done. Perhaps she went to see the prince? He thought, a flicker of hope mixed with concern. But she should have returned home to prepare our evening meal. How could she abandon her duties to spend time with him? As the sky darkened and the sun began to set completely, a heavy, ominous feeling settled deep within his chest. Something was wrong. He felt it with a chilling certainty in his bones. Just then, he saw the prince ride swiftly into the courtyard on his horse, his face etched with urgency. Baba Kofi's heart leaped with a sudden surge of hope, but as he looked closer, he realized with a sinking feeling that the prince was alone. The prince jumped off his horse and hurried towards him, his expression anxious. "Greetings, Baba Kofi," Prince Kwame said quickly, his voice tight with concern. "I have come to check on Ao, to see if she is well." "What?" Baba Kofi replied, his voice trembling with sudden panic. "Is she not with you, my prince?" "No," the prince replied, looking even more worried. "We had arranged to meet by the riverbank this evening, but when she did not appear, I decided to ride here to see if perhaps she was ill." Tears began to stream down Baba Kofi's face, his worst fears starting to materialize. "She is all that I have, Prince. I told you," She is everything to me, he cried out, his voice shaking with profound fear and grief. She went to fetch water this afternoon and has not returned since. A cold, icy dread shot down Prince Kwame's spine. His heart pounded heavily with mounting worry. How could this be happening? Where could she possibly have gone? Baba Kofi, please try to calm yourself, he said, his voice urgent but steady. I will send out the royal guards immediately to search throughout the village for her. Without wasting another second, the prince leaped back onto his horse and galloped away, shouting orders to the guards to begin a thorough search of the entire village, leaving no stone unturned. The whole village was soon gripped by a wave of frantic panic. Men went from house to house, knocking on doors, asking everyone if they had seen Ao. They searched every thicket of bushes, scoured the fields, and looked in every corner of the village, but after hours of searching, she was nowhere to be seen. Ao could not be found, as if she had vanished into thin air. The prince was utterly devastated. Tears streamed down his face as he sat by the banks of the Ogun River, the place where they had so often sat together, sharing laughter and dreams. His heart ached with an unbearable pain. Ao, his beloved, was gone. He loved her more deeply than anyone else in the world, and she had brought so much light and joy into his life. As he sat there, lost in his grief, a sudden, chilling thought struck him. Zira. With a sense of desperate urgency, he leaped back onto his horse and galloped towards Zira's house, his heart burning with a terrible suspicion. Zira! Zira, he shouted angrily, his voice raw with emotion. Where are you? Zira emerged from her house, looking annoyed and defensive. Why are you shouting my name like a mad dog? She snapped, her voice sharp. Is it not enough, or are you not yet finished shaming my family? The prince ignored her words, his gaze fixed on her, his eyes narrowed with accusation. Where is Ao? He demanded, his voice filled with barely suppressed rage. Zira sneered, a cruel twist of her lips. Since when do I become the keeper of your cheap harlot? Do not call her that. Kwame roared, clenching his fist, struggling to control his anger. You made threats, Zira, he said, his eyes piercing hers. I am certain you know what has happened to her. Where is she? What have you done? I said those words in anger, Zira replied, trying to sound innocent, feigning ignorance. I did not mean them. I do not know where she is. Zira seemed so convincing, so practiced in deceit, that the prince, despite his lingering doubts, felt his rage subside slightly, replaced by a cold dread. Zira, if I find out that you had anything at all, to do with this, I will never, ever forgive you, he warned her, his voice low and dangerous, before turning and walking away, his heart heavy with suspicion and sorrow. He made his way back to Baba Kofi's house with an incredibly heavy heart. The old man was weeping bitterly, inconsolable, and many of the villagers had gathered around, trying in vain to offer him comfort. Prince Kwame's heart was heavy with guilt as he looked at Kofi. He had promised to protect Ao, to keep her safe, and he had failed. Now, he felt it was his duty, his responsibility, to care for her father, the man who had meant the world to Ao. He could not simply leave him alone in his grief. He gently helped Kofi to his feet and assisted him onto his horse, then took him back with him to the palace. They would continue to hope, to wait, and to pray, desperately, that Ao would somehow be found, alive and unharmed. The prince knew he had to take care of Baba Kofi, just as Ao would have wanted. It seemed as though a dark, heavy cloud had settled over the entire kingdom. Everyone was filled with sadness and deep concern over Ao's sudden and inexplicable disappearance. The whole village seemed to be in a state of mourning. Baba Kofi, her father, could not stop weeping. He refused to be comforted, his grief too profound. His heart was utterly broken, and he cried bitter tears day and night. Prince Kwame was also deeply affected. Every day, he would walk to the Irako tree, the place where he had first met Ao, where he had first seen her magical dance, hoping against hope, praying with all his might that she would miraculously reappear from nowhere. He would sit there for hours, his heart aching with a terrible emptiness, but she never came. At other times, he would go to the banks of the Ogun River, sit by the water's edge where they had shared laughter and quiet conversations, hoping she would suddenly emerge from the depths and join him. But nothing changed. The prince felt as though he could no longer truly live, as though a vital part of his soul had been cruelly taken from him. "Ayo, where are you?" he would cry out, his voice filled with heartbroken anguish, echoing across the silent river. Meanwhile, far beneath the surface of the Ogun River, as Ayo was tragically drowning, she was seen by a beautiful mermaid named Imani. Imani had witnessed the terrible act, seen Zira and the other girls push Ayo into the river, and she felt a deep pity and compassion for the poor girl. She called out to her fellow mermaids, and together, with great care and gentleness, they carried Ayo's unconscious body to their hidden underwater kingdom, determined to keep her safe from the cruel people on the land. They moved carefully, with immense kindness, their hearts filled with sorrow for the unfortunate girl who had been so brutally wronged by those above the water. When Ayo finally regained consciousness, she found herself lying in a beautiful, luminous house, surrounded by clean, sparkling water. The walls shimmered with colors she had never seen before, and everything looked utterly magical and ethereal. She looked around in wonder, trying to understand where she was and how she had possibly arrived in such a place. Just then, a beautiful mermaid entered the room. She had long, flowing hair that drifted in the gentle currents and eyes that were kind and gentle, radiating warmth. Ayo gazed at her in silent awe. "Do not be afraid," the mermaid said softly, her voice like the gentle lapping of waves. "My name is Imani, and I mean you no harm. We only wish to keep you safe, away from the wicked people on the land who would stop at nothing to destroy others for no reason at all." As Imani spoke, memories flooded back into Ayo's mind with painful clarity. She remembered Zira and the other girls pushing her violently into the Ogun River, watching her drown. Tears filled her eyes, and they streamed down her face in renewed grief. "My father!" Ayo cried out, her voice trembling with distress. "I must go back to him. He will be so sad now, so worried." "You cannot return yet, Ayo," Imani replied gently, her voice full of compassion. "If you go back now, Zira will not rest until she has harmed you further, until she has finished what she started." "How do you know about Zira?" she asked, surprised that a creature from the river knew of the village girl. "We live in your village," Imani replied, a gentle smile on her face, "but we live beneath the water. We see and hear everything that happens there, all the joys and all the sorrows. Remember, we are not human. We have supernatural abilities, and we know how to gather information, how to see the truth." She looked at Ayo with pity and deep sympathy. "You have a pure and good heart, Ayo, and we will keep you safe here with us. When the time is right, the right time chosen by the gods, you will return to your life above. Do not worry about your father. The prince is taking very good care of him, ensuring he lacks nothing." Ayo nodded, still feeling a little overwhelmed by everything, but a sense of relief washed over her at hearing that her father was being cared for. "We will have a welcome reception for you tonight," Imani continued with a warm smile. "So you can meet everyone in our kingdom. They are all kind and friendly, just like us. We are making you a special tale, a beautiful one, so you can be just like us while you are here. You will feel at home here, I promise you. And if you need anything at all, just call for me, and I will come to you. You are Ayo, and now we are friends." Ayo couldn't help but smile back at her. Imani looked so beautiful and kind, and Ayo felt a small sense of peace settle in her heart, even in this strange and new place. "Thank you, Imani, for saving me," Ayo whispered, her voice filled with profound gratitude. "Of course," Imani replied warmly, her eyes gentle. "I could not possibly allow someone with such a beautiful heart to be lost forever." Ayo felt a warm glow spread through her. Perhaps, just perhaps, things would be all right for her in this new, unexpected home beneath the waves. Months passed by like leaves floating on the wind, and gradually, Ayo grew accustomed to her new life within the watery embrace of the Ogun River. She missed her father terribly and thought of Prince Kwame every single day, her heart aching with longing. But deep down in her soul, she knew, with a certainty she couldn't explain, that it was not yet time for her to return to the world above. The mermaids took wonderful care of her, surrounding her with warmth and kindness, ensuring she felt completely at home in their shimmering kingdom. They enveloped her in their friendship, helping her to forget the sorrow and the worries that had weighed so heavily upon her on the land. Their world was a place filled with laughter, warmth, and a pure joy unlike anything she had ever known before. She felt surrounded by devoted friends who treated her like family. It was a world so vastly different from the one she had left behind, and yet, every single night, she would dream of seeing just one glimpse of her father's beloved face or hearing the soft whisper of Kwame's voice. On the land above the water, Ao's father slowly began to recover from his initial shock and grief, although there were still moments when his eyes would fill with unshed tears, moments where his heart ached with missing her, but there was nothing he could do but mourn her presumed loss. Prince Kwame, true to his word, ensured that the elderly man was well cared for, providing him with everything he could possibly need: food, shelter, comfortable clothing, and companionship. However, the prince himself was far from well. Each day felt longer and darker than the last, his heart heavy with a profound, consuming longing for Ao. He had once been a lively, joyful young man, always seen laughing and strolling through the village with a bright, infectious smile. Now, that light had dimmed, his spirit was dampened, and he was merely a shadow of his former self, moving through life without his usual vibrancy. King Adebale and Queen Ayabo grew increasingly worried about their son's deep melancholy. They tried to comfort him with words of hope, to lift his spirits, but nothing seemed to reach him. Nothing worked. Even Zira, who had believed that Ao was out of the picture and that she could now finally have the prince to herself, felt a growing sense of frustration and disappointment. She had learned, over weeks and months, that no matter how hard she tried, how much she put herself in his path, the prince barely seemed to notice her presence. She tried for weeks, then months, before finally beginning to give up, though a stubborn, tiny part of her refused to entirely relinquish her desperate hope. 3 long years had passed, yet the prince remained submerged in his sorrow, a prisoner of his grief. He never stopped thinking about Ao, her memory a constant ache in his heart, his eyes forever scanning the crowds, hoping against hope to see her miraculously appear from somewhere, anywhere, just one more time. The king, aging and feeling the weight of his years and his crown, knew that the time had come for the prince to choose a wife, to settle down, and to prepare himself to finally assume the throne. Many beautiful and eligible girls from the village and beyond were presented to him, noble daughters from respected families, but Kwame refused them all, unwilling to even consider any of them as a potential wife. The king, feeling a growing sense of desperation, decided to call upon Baba Kofi, Ao's father, whom the prince deeply respected and cared for. The king hoped that Kofi, having shared in the loss and understanding the depth of Kwame's grief, might be able to speak with his son and help him find his way back from the darkness that enveloped him. Kofi agreed, his heart heavy with his own loss but filled with concern for the kind prince, and met with the prince that evening in the quiet solitude of the royal garden, beneath the watchful eyes of the stars. As they sat together, their faces etched with shared sadness, their eyes heavy with unspoken thoughts and emotions, a profound silence hung in the air. "I am sorry," the prince began, his voice barely above a whisper, thick with emotion. "I am so deeply sorry that I failed to keep my promise to protect her." "How long will you punish yourself, Kwame?" Kofi asked gently, his voice soft and compassionate. "Have you not tortured yourself enough with grief and guilt? It has been 3 long years since she disappeared from us. Do you not think it is time to let go, my prince? The people of this kingdom depend on you. Their future rests upon your shoulders, and you cannot continue living in this shadow. Listen to the advice of an old man, the advice of her father. Find a wife, move forward with your life, arrange your affairs, please, my prince. For the sake of your people, for the sake of your own well-being. Prince Kwame remained silent for a long while, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon, lost in his own sorrowful thoughts. Finally, he took a deep, shuddering breath and spoke, his voice filled with profound pain. "I do not think I can ever truly move on, Baba Kofi," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. "I see her everywhere I look. I feel her presence around me, as if she is still alive somewhere, just out of my reach, in a place I cannot find. I cannot love another woman, not like I loved her, not with the same depth and intensity." His eyes glistened with unshed tears as he spoke, the pain in his heart evident. "You can, my prince," Kofi said softly, his voice gentle but firm with conviction. Ao was a kind and gentle soul, a sweet girl who wanted only for others to be happy, for peace to prevail. Wherever she is now, wherever the gods have taken her, I am certain she would want you to be happy, to find joy again. You are not betraying her memory by choosing to live, by choosing to find happiness again. Please, my prince, think deeply about this. I thank you, my prince, from the bottom of my heart, for being the son I never had, for caring for me when I lost my only child." He placed a comforting hand on the prince's shoulder, a gesture of shared grief and understanding. Kwame nodded, but remained silent, lost in his thoughts. He felt a deep, persistent ache in his heart. What he had shared with Ao was something truly special, something precious, something he was reluctant to let go of completely. But he also had a duty, a profound responsibility to his people, to the kingdom, and Kofi was right. 3 long years had passed, and his people needed their prince, their future king. The prince finally, reluctantly, agreed to settle down with another girl from the village, but his heart remained heavy and deeply uncertain. He told his father that he would marry, that he understood his duty, but he could not bring himself to choose the girl himself. "You may choose any girl you believe to be suitable, father," he said softly, his voice weary but resigned. "I am not ready to open my heart to anyone else just yet, but I know that I must do this for the sake of our kingdom, for the sake of our people's future. I cannot fail them again, not like I failed Ao." His voice was filled with profound sadness, but there was also a quiet determination in his eyes, a resolve to fulfill his duty. A wave of profound happiness washed over King Adebale. This was a significant step for his son, a sign that perhaps, just perhaps, he might be able to heal from his grief and eventually find love again. The king wanted to make these special moments, this choosing of a bride, into something that could help bring hope and light back into the prince's heavy heart. He sincerely believed that love would find its way to his son again, even if it took time, even if it was different from what he had lost. With excitement bubbling within him, the king sent for the royal town crier to spread the momentous news throughout the land. The crier's voice, loud and clear, echoed through every street and corner of the village, announcing to all who could hear, "In 14 market days, the prince will choose a wife. All the beautiful maidens of the village are invited to gather at the palace, dressed in their finest attire, to showcase their most beautiful and captivating dance steps before the prince and the kingdom." The news spread like wildfire, igniting excitement throughout the land, and soon the entire kingdom buzzed with infectious anticipation. Wherever you went, that was all anyone was talking about, the great event, the prince choosing his bride. The streets were filled with laughter and joy, and the air was alive with the sounds of excited chatter, singing, and impromptu music. Every girl in the village, young and old, dreamed of becoming the next queen, of standing beside Prince Kwame, who was not only handsome but also known throughout the land for his kindness and gentle heart. Many hearts fluttered with hope and excitement at the mere thought that he might choose them, that they might be the lucky one. Groups of girls walked together to the Ogun River to fetch water, or headed to the Arya market for food, their voices full of shared excitement as they talked animatedly about the upcoming dance competition. They whispered secrets to each other about the dresses they would wear and planned how they would dance their best, hoping to capture the prince's discerning eye and win his heart. The market, too, was filled with a festive spirit as people conversed and laughed about the approaching celebration. Everyone wanted to be a part of the prince's big day, to witness the choosing of the future queen. Zira, the girl who had once so confidently hoped to win Kwame's heart through their betrothal, felt a renewed surge of desperate hope ignite within her. This was another chance, a public one, to reclaim what she still fiercely believed was rightfully hers. She walked through the village with her head held high again, a defiant confidence radiating from her, boasting to anyone who would listen, "This time, I will get the prince back. He is mine." She believed with all her heart and soul that this was her moment, her triumphant return, her destiny. Every evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in fiery colors, Zira diligently practiced her dance steps in the shade of a large, old tree. She moved with intense power and raw energy, as though her very life depended on each step, each turn. She twirled and swayed, her body fluid and strong, vividly imagining the day she would stand before the prince, her heart pounding with excitement and confident hope. She was utterly determined to win, to regain her lost status, her crown, and she believed that absolutely nothing could stop her this time. Days passed, and the anticipation continued to build throughout the kingdom. The village buzzed with palpable excitement, and everyone, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, was counting down the days. Young and old, rich and poor alike, felt the tremor of anticipation in the air. It seemed as though the entire kingdom was waiting with bated breath for the great day to arrive. The prince would choose his bride, and everyone speculated endlessly on who the lucky maiden would be. The day grew closer, and hearts were filled with a mixture of hope, dreams, and nervous energy. A few days before the grand event was scheduled to take place, Zira already felt immensely proud of her progress. She had honed her dance steps to perfection, her movements precise and powerful, and she was absolutely confident that she would capture the prince's attention and win his heart, that the special ointment would guarantee it. But then, a new idea, a cunning thought, crept into her mind. Why not do something extra? Something that would absolutely guarantee she did not leave the palace that day without becoming the prince's chosen bride? She decided, with a sly glint in her eyes, that she needed just a little more help to ensure her dream became a reality. Zira quickly went to her mother and shared her secret plan, her voice low and conspiratorial. Together, they decided to visit a powerful local doctor, a sorcerer, who lived in a distant village, far away from their own, known for his potent charms and potions. The journey was long and arduous, but Zira did not mind. She was utterly determined to achieve her goal, no matter the cost or effort. When they finally reached the old man's secluded house, they explained their need, their desperate wish. The local doctor listened intently, his eyes shrewd, then a sly, knowing smile spread across his lips. He mixed together various herbs and strange, unidentifiable ingredients into a thick, dark paste and handed it to them in a small clay pot. "This is a very special ointment," he said with a cunning smirk, his voice raspy. "On the day of the dance competition, you must rub this over your entire body, from head to toe, before you go to the palace. When the prince sees you dancing, coated in this charm, he will be utterly unable to take his eyes off you. His heart will be powerfully drawn to you, and he will have no choice but to choose you as his bride." Zira and her mother were absolutely overjoyed, their hearts leaping with triumphant excitement. They thanked the local doctor profusely and rewarded him generously for his services. With hearts full of anticipation and a newfound confidence, they began their journey back to their village, feeling certain that they had secured Zira's future as the next queen. Finally, the morning of the great event arrived, a day marked for destiny. From the early hours of the day, the air was filled with the pulsating sounds of the drums, their resonant beat echoing across the village and announcing the beginning of the joyous occasion. The entire village seemed to awaken, buzzing with vibrant excitement. Girls danced with spontaneous joy in their homes and in the streets, dreaming of being the chosen bride of the kind prince. Everyone, young and old, rich and poor, eagerly awaited what was to come. A grand event like this had not been witnessed in the kingdom for many years. As the sun climbed high in the sky, bathing everything in its warm golden light, people began to gather at the palace grounds. They arrived dressed in their most vibrant and beautiful attire, their faces shining with excitement and fervent hope. The villagers, too, were dressed in their finest clothes, eager to spectate and be part of the grand spectacle. Zira walked proudly towards the palace, accompanied by her friends who served as her attendants, surrounding her like a personal guard. She held her head high, a picture of haughty confidence, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and anticipation as she made her way into the palace courtyard. She felt an absolute certainty, deep in her bones, that this was her day. Today, she would once again become the prince's betrothed, his chosen one. She could feel it with every fiber of her being, bolstered by the charm she had used. Seated beneath a large, beautifully decorated canopy sat the king and queen, their faces alight with warm smiles, ready for the joyous occasion. Beside them sat Prince Kwame. His face, however, was empty of expression, showing no emotion whatsoever. He gazed out at the vast crowd gathered in the large palace courtyard, his mind miles away, lost in his own private thoughts, his heart heavy with the memory of Ao. Then, the drums beat louder, a commanding rhythm filling the air, and the dancing began. One after another, the girls came forward, moving gracefully to the beat of the music, their colorful skirts swirling around them like vibrant petals. The crowd cheered and applauded enthusiastically, enjoying every step, every turn, every flourish. Zira watched intently from the side, her heart beating faster with each passing moment. She knew her time was approaching. She took a deep, steadying breath, feeling the cool sensation of the magical ointment on her skin, reassuring her. She was ready, more than ready. This was her chance, and she fully intended to make it unforgettable. One by one, the girls stepped forward, their feet moving rhythmically with the pulse of the drums, their waists swaying and twirling, each one trying their utmost to capture the prince's attention. Each girl hoped that her dance would be the one, the special dance that would make him smile, make him finally see her, and only her, among the sea of faces. But Prince Kwame remained seated, still and unmoving, his face devoid of emotion, his eyes distant, showing no sign of interest or joy. As each girl finished her performance and stepped back, he seemed utterly untouched by their efforts, their beauty, their skill. He did not applaud, did not cheer. He simply stared straight ahead, as if lost in another world entirely, disconnected from the festivities happening before him. Zira stood to the side, a sly, confident smile spreading across her face. She looked disdainfully at the other girls, feeling an arrogant certainty that the prince belonged to her and only her, that their attempts were futile. She thought to herself, none of these girls can possibly compete with me. They are nothing compared to me, the chosen one. When it was finally her turn, she stepped forward with an air of supreme confidence. She danced harder and more forcefully than she ever had before, her feet moving rapidly, her waist shaking, her arms flowing gracefully through the air. She twirled and swayed, every movement calculated to make the prince see her, to make him fall under her powerful spell, the spell of the ointment. But as Zira danced with all her might, she noticed something strange, something unsettling. The prince was not looking at her. He seemed detached, his face still, unmoving, showing no sign of interest or joy in her performance. He didn't even spare her a single glance. Zira felt a creeping sense of confusion and unease begin to settle in her stomach. The charm, the special ointment, was supposed to make the prince fall instantly and irrevocably in love with her. Why wasn't it working? What had gone wrong? Soon, all the girls had finished their dances, and yet the prince had chosen no one. The air grew thick with palpable disappointment, and the crowd began to whisper amongst themselves, their voices a low murmur of confusion. The king, sitting beneath the majestic canopy, frowned deeply, a look of displeasure on his face. He looked angrily at his son and called out, his voice stern, "What is happening, Kwame? You must make your choice now. The people are waiting." But the prince did not reply. Instead, he slowly stood up, as if he were about to leave, to walk away from the spectacle. Just at that moment, the music changed. A new, soft, hauntingly beautiful melody filled the air, and everyone turned their heads, their eyes wide with surprise, to see a girl sitting gracefully upon a white horse, her figure shimmering in the sunlight, her face concealed behind a delicate veil, and her dress sparkling like the morning dew. The crowd gasped collectively, their eyes wide with utter astonishment. "Who is that?" they whispered to each other, filled with wonder and speculation. The mysterious girl dismounted from her horse with effortless grace and began to dance. She moved to the music with such exquisite skill and profound grace that the entire crowd fell silent, mesmerized, watching her in awestruck admiration. Her steps were fluid and strangely familiar, like the movement of a gentle breeze on a hot day. The prince's heart began to beat faster, a frantic rhythm in his chest. He watched her intently, a strange feeling stirring deep within him, a feeling of recognition. "That dance," he thought, his mind racing. "I know that dance. It is Ao's dance." He strained his eyes, trying desperately to see through the veil, to glimpse the face hidden beneath. A strange, chilling feeling washed over him, and he felt goosebumps rise on his arms, a shiver running down his spine. It felt, impossibly, as though Ao was there, dancing right before him. The goosebumps intensified, and his heart pounded harder than it ever had before, a wild drum against his ribs. The girl's dance was like pure magic, her movements utterly captivating and breathtakingly beautiful, the most mesmerizing performance anyone had witnessed in the village in many, many years. The village stood in silent awe, their mouths slightly open in wonder, as they watched her glide across the ground with unparalleled grace and skill. Finally, as the drums faded into silence, the girl stopped dancing and walked slowly, deliberately, towards the prince. She stopped before him and slowly, dramatically, lifted her veil. "What?" the prince exclaimed, his voice filled with overwhelming shock and pure joy, a gasp escaping his lips. "Ao," he cried out, her name a joyous sound. He reached out a trembling hand to take hers, his eyes wide with utter disbelief and wonder. He had not seen that beloved face in so long, and now, here it was, right before him. He didn't care in that moment if she was human or a spirit returned. She was here. Ao's face was even more beautiful than he remembered, more radiant than ever, glowing with a light that seemed to emanate from deep within her soul. The prince simply stood frozen, speechless, unable to voice the multitude of emotions surging through him, his heart overflowing with sudden, unexpected happiness. "Yes, it is I," she replied, her voice soft and warm, yet carrying clearly through the hushed crowd. "It is I," Ao returned. The entire village remained frozen in stunned silence, unsure of what they were seeing, doubting their own eyes. Zira's eyes were wide with unadulterated terror. She distinctly remembered seeing Ao drown in the deep waters of the Ogun River. "How has she returned?"
"Ghost."
"It's a ghost," she shrieked, her voice shrill with panic, turning to flee. But before she could take another step, the gods, in their divine justice, struck her down, freezing her instantly where she stood, unable to move. Ao turned to face Zira, her stance strong, her voice suddenly powerful and clear, echoing through the courtyard. "Let the villagers hear what you did," she commanded, her voice resonating with authority. Zira's face turned deathly pale, and tears began to stream down her cheeks, tears of fear and shame. Ao's voice carried such a strange, compelling power that it compelled Zira to immediately begin speaking, to confess. Trembling, she admitted everything, her voice choked with sobs. She told the assembled villagers how she and her friends had cornered Ao, pushed her into the deep Ogun River, and watched as she drowned, ensuring she sank beneath the surface. She confessed that she had hoped Ao would never return to the village, so that the prince would be hers and only hers. The crowd gasped collectively, hands flying to their mouths in disbelief and horror. Fear was quickly replaced by profound disgust, their faces contorting with anger and shock at the cruelty they had just heard confessed. They were furious. their gazes fixed on Zira and her cowering friends, who were now lying crippled on the ground, unable to move, struck down by the swift hand of divine justice. The gods had delivered their righteous punishment. Then, Ao began to tell her own story, recounting to them how the kind mermaids had rescued her from the depths of the Ogun River and had cared for her, sheltered her, and kept her safe throughout all the long years she had been gone from the land above. As she spoke, the prince's eyes filled with tears of pure, joyful relief. He was finally, miraculously, reunited with the woman he loved, the woman he had mourned. Baba Kofi, Ao's father, rushed forward, his heart bursting with emotion, and embraced his daughter tightly, tears streaming down his own face. "I never thought I would live to see this day again," he whispered, his voice trembling with overwhelming emotion, holding his precious child. Ao looked even more beautiful and radiant than anyone remembered, and everyone could see the brilliant light of happiness shining brightly in her eyes. The mood at the palace quickly shifted from stunned shock to joyous celebration. The drums began to beat once more, this time with a triumphant, joyful sound, and the people danced and sang, overcome with happiness and relief that Ao had returned, that she was alive. The entire village celebrated together, their hearts filled with collective happiness and immense relief. The prince and Ao stood together, smiling, as the villagers cheered and welcomed her back, their beloved Ao, the girl with a kind heart. It was a day none of them would ever forget, a day of miracles and justice. After the initial greetings and joyous laughter had subsided slightly, the prince found he couldn't take his eyes off Ao. He gently took her hands in his, feeling the familiar warmth and comfort he had missed for so long, and led her towards the raised platform where everyone could see them clearly. His heart was overflowing with happiness, his eyes sparkling with radiant excitement, like the stars on a clear night. He felt as though a heavy burden had been lifted from his heart, a weight he had carried for years, and now, standing beside Ao, he felt whole again, complete. He turned to face Ao, his voice strong but tender, filled with deep emotion. "My life was like a dark, moonless night without the light of your presence," he said, looking deeply into her beautiful eyes. "But now that you have returned, I feel the sun shining in my heart again. You are my happiness, Ao, my joy, and I cannot possibly imagine a life without you by my side." Then, with a smile that spread across his face like the dawn, he turned to face the cheering crowd and declared, his voice ringing with conviction, "This is the woman of my dreams, the one I have searched for, the one I have mourned. She is the one I choose to be my wife, my queen." Tears streamed down Zira's face, hot and bitter, her heart clenched tight with a terrible mix of regret and profound shame. Her legs, once strong and swift in the dance, were now crippled, useless, and the devastating realization washed over her that she would never walk again, never dance, never run. Then, the voice of the king, powerful and resonant, rang out across the courtyard, delivering the final judgment. "I will not allow such evil, such wickedness, to remain on our land," he declared angrily, his voice booming with righteous indignation. He ordered the immediate exile of the Jabulani family, including their crippled daughter and her complicit friends, banishing them from the village forever. As they were driven out, disgraced and broken, the village children, spurred by anger and the sight of the cripples, picked up stones from the ground, throwing them at Zira and her family as they were led away. With each stone that struck her, Zira felt a sharp, agonizing pang of both physical pain and deep, unbearable sorrow. Her heart ached with a terrible, all-consuming regret. She wished more than anything in the world that she could turn back time, that she could undo her actions, that she could have made a different, better choice. The humiliation of being exiled, driven out before everyone, the mockery and the sheer degradation, was far worse than the pain of losing the prince had ever been. Tears flowed relentlessly down her face, and her heart was filled with a deep, crushing sadness, a profound despair. She finally understood, in this moment of utter ruin, that her own boundless greed, Her unchecked jealousy and her cruel arrogance had led directly to this terrible, irreversible moment of her downfall. Back at the palace, the celebrations continued with renewed vigor, filled with joy, music, and dancing. The people danced and sang, celebrating the miraculous return of Ao and the radiant happiness of their beloved prince. In the weeks that followed, Prince Kwame and Princess Ao were married in a truly grand and magnificent ceremony befitting their station. The entire village gathered, united in happiness, to celebrate their union, their future together. Baba Kofi, Ao's father, was simply overjoyed, his heart overflowing with happiness at seeing his daughter finally finding such love and joy, standing radiant by the prince's side. King Adebale and Queen Ayabo smiled warmly upon the couple, knowing that their son had finally found true love and a partner worthy of his heart and the kingdom. The villagers also celebrated with all their hearts, their spirits lifted, eagerly anticipating the bright and prosperous future they believed their new rulers would bring. Prince Kwame and Princess Ao began their life together, ruling side by side, and their love for each other grew deeper and stronger with each passing day. As they became King Kwame and Queen Ao, they ruled the kingdom with unparalleled fairness, profound wisdom, and boundless kindness. Under their benevolent leadership, the land prospered, the harvests were plentiful, and the people lived in peace, happiness, and contentment. Everyone felt incredibly fortunate to have such good and caring rulers, guided by love and justice. Once a year, Queen Ao would return to the banks of the Ogun River, carrying gifts and offerings, beautiful flowers, sweet fruits, and precious ornaments. She would kneel at the water's edge, offering profound gratitude to the kind mermaids who had saved her life and cared for her during those long, dark years she was away from the land above. She never forgot their kindness, their compassion, and always showed her heartfelt appreciation. And so, Prince Kwame and Queen Ao lived long and happy lives together, their hearts forever filled with deep love for each other and their people, and their kingdom blessed with enduring peace and abundant joy.